I realized the silence meant more than the words. She was standing by the window, the sunlight catching the edges of her hair, soft golden streaks framing a face that seemed carved from memory and longing I didn't fully understand yet. I didn't dare speak at first. Not because I couldn't find the words, but because I was afraid the wrong ones might ruin what didn't even have a name yet. Her presence was the kind that filled a room without trying. I noticed the slight curve of her shoulder as she reached for her coffee cup, the faint tilt of her head as she listened to the soft hum of the city outside. Everything about her was alive and patient, yet somehow untouchable. I had met women before her, of course, but no one moved through a space the way she did. No one could make silence feel like an invitation instead of emptiness. I cleared my throat and she turned, eyes locking onto mine for a moment that stretched too long. I swallowed and tried to smile, but it felt clumsy next to the effortless grace she radiated. "Hey," I said, voice lower than I intended. "Hey," she replied, her tone casual, almost teasing, but it carried a weight that made my chest tighten. She didn't need to say more. I already knew I wanted to hear every word she would never say aloud. We'd met weeks ago at a small bookstore tucked between a cafe and a flower shop. She had been reading a worn copy of poetry I didn't recognize, and I had asked a stupid question about the author. She laughed softly, a sound that lodged itself somewhere behind my ribs. That was when I first noticed the way her fingers lingered over the page, as if she was trying to memorize more than the words. I wanted to memorize her the same way. Now, standing in her apartment, I felt both out of place and utterly at home. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old books, and I couldn't stop my eyes from tracing the line of her collarbone, the gentle slope of her jaw, the way her lips parted slightly as she considered something, anything, without saying it. "You don't drink coffee, do you?" she asked, tilting her head just enough for sunlight to illuminate the flecks in her eyes. I shook my head, suddenly aware that I hadn't thought about anything except her since the moment I stepped in. "No. Never really liked it." "Then why are you here?" Her smile was soft, curious, and somehow challenging. I wanted to tell her it was for her, for this, the quiet, the unsaid. But I only said, "I like being here." And that was true, though incomplete. She laughed again, quieter this time, and it made me feel like I'd been holding my breath without knowing it. I wanted to step closer, to reach out, to close the distance between the quiet and the ache. But I hesitated. My hands rested on the edge of the kitchen counter, tight enough that I could feel my own pulse in my fingertips. It wasn't just attraction. It was a gravity I didn't understand yet, a pull that made the world outside fade until it was only her, the way she moved, the way she looked, the way she made every silence a question I didn't want answered too quickly. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words dissolved before they could leave me. She smiled again, and my chest contracted, caught between wanting to speak and knowing some things were better left unsaid for a while. And then, just as the tension seemed like it could finally break, the doorbell rang. Sharp. Insistent. Unexpected. We froze. She glanced at me, her eyes widening ever so slightly, and I realized my heart was racing, not from the visitor, not even from the anticipation of who it might be, but because I couldn't look away from her. And in that pause, suspended between the silence and the interruption, I understood something I hadn't before. The moments between words could be louder than anything spoken. I didn't move toward the door. I couldn't. Not yet. Something in the way she stood, slightly stiff, but not defensive, made me hesitate. I could feel the old rules I'd grown up with tugging at me: stay polite, stay distant, stay safe. But the moment her eyes met mine again, all those rules dissolved like smoke. She poured herself another coffee without asking if I wanted one. I didn't notice the steam curling from the cup. I was too caught up in the way her hands moved, in the faint tremor I'd seen in her fingers when she first reached for her mug. She'd always been this composed, and yet there was a fragility beneath it. I remembered her mentioning her last relationship once, months ago, almost casually, in the bookstore. Her voice had carried a softness I'd never heard before, a kind of quiet heartbreak. A man who didn't understand her fully, who had expected her to fit into a life that wasn't hers. She hadn't been bitter, just careful. Experienced. Wary. That awareness, that cautious elegance, made her even more magnetic. And then there was me, 20, reckless in ways I didn't even realize yet. I'd only had brief flings, messy and shallow, never anything that lasted past the weekend or a morning coffee. I didn't know how to navigate the gravity of someone like her, someone whose history was layered and textured and sometimes painful. There was another complication I couldn't stop thinking about. She was a friend of my older sister. I had met her at family dinners, casual smiles and polite chatter, nothing more. And now, here, alone, with sunlight falling on her in a way that made her look untouchable, I felt the weight of what this attraction meant. It was forbidden, or at least, complicated, and that made it almost unbearable. I tried to focus on something else. Anything. The rhythm of the rain beginning against the window, the faint scent of vanilla from her candle, the softness of the rug beneath my shoes. But every sensory detail circled back to her. Every small movement, every flicker of emotion across her face, made my pulse climb and my thoughts trip over themselves. She caught me staring at her once, not in judgment, not in amusement, just noticing. Her lips curved in a half-smile, a question I didn't want answered. I wanted to confess everything I was thinking, everything I felt, but the words lodged in my throat, stubborn and silent. Instead, I let my hand brush against hers when I reached for a mug. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but electric. I didn't pull away immediately, and neither did she. There was a moment, a fraction of a second, maybe a heartbeat longer, where the space between us seemed charged with something we both knew but refused to name. And in that silence, with the faint hum of the city outside and her gaze holding mine like a gentle weight, I realized that some connections couldn't be defined by rules or logic. Some things were dangerous, yes, but also inevitable. I wanted to lean in, to see if the rest of the world could disappear, just for a moment. But the doorbell rang again, soft this time, hesitant. She glanced at it, and I felt a thrill of both dread and anticipation, knowing that however this ended, nothing would ever feel the same again. The doorbell's echo still lingered in my ears when she finally moved, her steps careful, deliberate. I wanted to follow, wanted to say something, but I froze, caught between wanting to intrude and wanting to stay exactly where I was. She opened the door a crack. A neighbor, probably asking for sugar or some trivial favor. I could hear her laugh softly, polite, the kind of laugh that carried a shield and a vulnerability at the same time. I swallowed hard, my pulse thrumming like a warning drum in my chest. When she turned back toward me, there was a slight flush in her cheeks. Something unspoken passed between us in that moment, something dangerous. I caught her hand lingering near her face, fingers brushing her hair. My own hand itched to reach out again, even though every rational thought told me not to. I should go, I said before I could stop myself. The words sounded absurd. Go? When I didn't want to move an inch closer. Her eyes flicked up, calm but sharp. You don't have to leave, she said softly, but there was a pause in her voice, a hesitation that made my stomach twist. Something was unspoken there, something heavy that neither of us was ready to name. I could feel the weight of the forbidden pressing down on me. She was older, wise, careful, everything I wasn't. And yet, when she glanced at me, I saw a spark, brief but undeniable. It made me forget my own caution, forget the absurdity of being here, alone, in a living room that suddenly felt too small and too full all at once. I took a step forward. She didn't retreat. I froze again. Her lips parted slightly, just enough for a breath to escape, a signal that made my chest tighten. I wanted, no, needed, to close the distance, but the world intruded. The faint sound of keys rattling in the lock downstairs made both of us flinch. I knew immediately who it was, her ex-husband, stopping by to collect something she had left behind months ago. The timing was unbearable. I could feel my heart rate spike. I wanted to vanish, to disappear before he saw me, before he saw anything that wasn't meant to be. She glanced at me, a subtle plea in her eyes, and I nodded almost imperceptibly. No words. We both understood that this moment wasn't ours, not fully, not yet. The lock clicked. Footsteps. I could feel the air shift, heavy with tension and unsaid desires. My hand hovered near hers, closer than socially acceptable, yet we didn't move it. The room felt like it had shrunk, filled with the weight of what could happen and what mustn't. For a moment, everything stopped, the approaching footsteps, the distant hum of the city, even my own racing thoughts. All that existed was her, standing there with a glance that said more than anything spoken could. And then, the sound of the front door opening sent a jolt through both of us. She inhaled sharply. I took a cautious step back, but I didn't look away. In that suspended second, I realized the truth. The closer we tried to pull away, the closer we were drawn to each other. The tension was electric, inevitable, and terrifying. Couldn't focus on anything except the way she moved across the room, the curve of her shoulder under that soft sweater, the subtle shake in her hands as she reached for the kettle. Every movement felt magnified, every glance a challenge I couldn't ignore. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance that wasn't just physical, but something heavier, rules, fear, the impossible. And then I saw it. A text lighting up her phone. I shouldn't have looked, but curiosity and something darker, something I wasn't ready to name, pulled my eyes toward it. It was from him. Her ex. My chest tightened. I couldn't read it, didn't need to, but the way she stiffened when it buzzed made my stomach drop. She noticed me noticing. Her eyes flicked to mine, and I saw something raw in them, a flash of guilt, or fear, or longing, I couldn't tell. My hand itched to cover hers, to tell her everything was safe with me, but we both knew it wasn't that simple. Are you okay? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, half smile, fragile, almost painful. I'm fine, she said. But the pause stretched, heavy with things we weren't saying. I could see it in her jaw, the tiny bite of her lip, the way her fingers tapped the counter. Her composure, usually effortless, was cracking. And it wasn't just about the text. I felt it, her walls, built over years of careful restraint, beginning to crumble. I stepped closer. My heart hammered, every nerve screaming that I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself. She didn't move away. Her eyes widened just a fraction, a silent warning, or an invitation, I couldn't tell which. I don't know if I should be here, I said, the words clumsy, but honest. My voice shook, betraying my own desperation. I know, this is wrong in so many ways. But I can't. Her hand brushed mine, light, almost accidental, but the electricity shot straight through me. I froze. She didn't pull away. I didn't either. The room felt impossibly small, filled only with the sound of our breathing, our unspoken truths hanging between us like fragile glass. I shouldn't want this, she murmured, barely audible. Her voice cracked, and I could see the weight of every restraint she'd held, every boundary she'd promised herself, unraveling in a heartbeat. I swallowed. My fingers twitched. I wanted to close the space between us, to feel her, to risk everything, even if the world outside our little bubble would never forgive it. But there was still the door, still reality pressing in, still all the reasons we couldn't. And then she looked at me, full on, no shields, no half smiles. Her eyes were a question, a challenge, a confession all at once. I could feel the pull, the impossible gravity drawing us closer, closer, closer. I leaned in, almost just a fraction, just enough to know how it would feel. My lips hovered near hers, our breaths mingling, hearts racing. But then, the sound of the elevator hitting the lobby floor made us both flinch. The moment shattered. My pulse didn't slow. Her hand lingered near mine, trembling slightly, and I realized one thing with crystal clarity: nothing would ever be the same after this, but I knew where we stood. I thought the walls between us were fragile but steady, like glass that could shatter if handled too roughly, but manageable. I was wrong. The twist came with a sound I never expected: her phone, buzzing insistently on the counter. I saw her glance at it, hesitation frozen on her face. The screen lit up again, and I caught a glimpse of the sender, my sister's name. My heart skipped a beat. I shouldn't have read it. I shouldn't have cared. But the words were there, clear as daylight. "Did you see him at her apartment today? She's hiding something. I think you need to know." Everything shifted. The safety I thought existed, the small, fragile bubble of just us, exploded. I could feel my chest tighten, hot panic spreading through me. My sister. She had seen us. Or maybe she suspected. Or maybe she thought she did. Either way, nothing could stay the same now. She noticed my sudden stillness. Her brow furrowed. What's wrong?" Her voice was calm, almost too calm. That was the moment I realized the stakes had risen. There was no hiding, no sidestepping. I swallowed. "It's nothing." But I couldn't lie. Not this time. Not with her. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "My sister, she sent me a message. She thinks," I broke off, the weight of exposure pressing down. Her lips pressed together, eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in recognition. She had known, all along, that this could happen. That we were tempting a line we weren't supposed to cross. And suddenly, the careful control she'd maintained for weeks, months maybe, seemed like it was on the verge of collapse. "I should have told you sooner," she said, voice low. Vulnerable. Real. It wasn't an excuse, it was a confession. I thought we could keep this between us. That we could handle it. I stepped closer, impulsively, desperately. My hand hovered near hers, but I didn't touch. "We can handle it," I whispered, though my voice betrayed me. We just need a chance." She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. "You don't understand. This isn't just about us. There's your sister, my life. Everything. And if this leaks, if anyone knows," her words stopped, trapped in her throat, heavy with the weight of all the consequences we'd been dancing around. I could feel my own desperation matching hers. My chest ached in a way I couldn't explain. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but reality pressed down like a fist. And yet, in the same instant, I knew something undeniable: the risk didn't make me pull away. It drew me closer. Our eyes met, locked in a silent war between desire and fear. Every heartbeat, every tremble, every subtle shift in her stance shouted the same truth: nothing could protect us from this, nothing except maybe each other. And then, as if testing the universe, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, hesitation, fear, something unreadable. I watched her, breath caught, knowing that whatever happened next could either destroy us, or force us to finally cross the line we'd been circling for weeks. Watched her phone light up again, but this time I didn't flinch. I didn't pull back. I couldn't. Something inside me had snapped, the part that had been holding me in check, whispering about consequences and propriety, about what was right and safe. "I can't keep hiding this," she said suddenly, voice trembling, and my chest tightened. She set the phone down, her hands lingering on the counter, fingers brushing each other like they were afraid to touch more. I've been careful, but I can't anymore. I won't. I stepped closer. My hands hovered near hers, unsure, trembling even though I wanted to be certain. Then tell me what you want, I said, voice raw, almost breaking. Not what's safe. Not what makes sense. What you want. Her eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, the walls came down. I saw it all there, the longing, the hesitation, the fear of being judged, the risk she had been carrying silently. And I realized I wanted it all too. I wanted her, even if it made the world messy. Even if it meant walking into fire. I want this, she whispered, her words small but deliberate, shaking as they left her lips. I want you. I shouldn't, maybe, but I do. I closed the last few steps between us. My hands found hers, interlaced like a promise we weren't ready to define. And in that tiny, electric connection, all the tension, all the waiting, all the impossible calculations of right and wrong fell away. There was just us, messy, fragile, human. Her breath hitched. Are you sure? She asked, voice barely audible, and I shook my head with a bitter laugh. No. I'm terrified. But I'm done pretending I'm not. She leaned into me then, almost imperceptibly. Our foreheads touched, and the world outside didn't exist, no judgment, no rules, no expectations. Just the pull between us, undeniable and chaotic. I've been careful, she murmured against my chest. I've tried to control everything. But you make me feel things I haven't in years. I know, I said, letting my voice drop, low, honest. I feel them too. Every second we're like this, it's unbearable and perfect at the same time. And then we froze, because the elevator dinged again. Reality intruded with its cold, hard presence. I could feel her stiffen slightly, our hands still locked, our breaths mingling. But something had shifted irreversibly. For the first time, we were no longer hiding behind restraint. No longer running from what we wanted. And even though the world outside would always be complicated, for this one suspended moment, we were aligned. Her eyes found mine, searching, questioning, but with a spark I hadn't seen before. A challenge. A promise. A beginning. And I knew, as I held her, that whatever came next, whatever consequences waited outside this apartment, we had crossed the line. We had acknowledged it. We had chosen each other, messy, human, and real. The doorbell rang again, soft, almost hesitant, but I didn't care. She squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back. Everything had changed. And yet, nothing had been decided, not fully. The apartment was quiet again, the only sounds our breaths and the faint hum of the city outside. I still had my hand in hers, fingers intertwined as if letting go would undo everything we had survived in the last hours. She leaned against me, head resting lightly on my shoulder. I could feel the slow rise and fall of her breath, and in that rhythm I felt something steady, something real. The chaos of fear, secrecy, and temptation had finally given way to yes. Not perfect. Not simple. But undeniable. I never thought I'd do something like this, she murmured, voice soft but steady. With you. It's frightening. I laughed quietly, shaking my head. I know. Me too. But it doesn't feel wrong, not with you. Not anymore. Her fingers tightened around mine, and I felt a shiver pass between us. All the hesitation, the guilt, the rules we'd tried to honor, they didn't vanish completely, but they became smaller, manageable. Love doesn't erase consequences, I realized. It only makes the risk worth it. We spent the next hour talking quietly, sharing pieces of our lives we hadn't dared to before. She spoke about the loneliness that had shadowed her after years of compromise, about the little heartbreaks that no one noticed but shaped her anyway. I shared my fears, my mistakes, my reckless youth, and even in the telling, I felt closer to her than I had ever imagined possible. And yet, the world beyond these walls waited. My sister would ask questions. The ex would still exist in the margins of her life. There were obligations, expectations, whispers of disapproval, and the inevitable challenges ahead. But none of it mattered in that moment. None of it could undo the truth we had acknowledged. We didn't need grand declarations, dramatic confessions, or perfect timing. A shared smile, a brush of fingers, a look that said, "I see you, I choose you," was enough. It was messy, human, and achingly real, the kind of love that leaves marks not just on your heart but in the way you breathe. I realized then that endings weren't always about closure. Sometimes, endings were about beginnings. A door closing behind the past, and a tentative, trembling step forward into something uncertain but ours. I leaned closer, whispering against her hair, "Whatever comes, we face it together." She smiled, eyes glinting with warmth and mischief. "Together," she repeated, like it was both a promise and a question. And I thought about all the silences that had meant more than words, all the touches we had held back, all the moments suspended between fear and desire. They weren't gone, they had led us here. The city lights flickered through the windows, painting her face in soft gold and shadow. I felt a surge of hope, fragile but insistent. We had risked everything, and somehow, against the odds, we had found each other. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for now, right here, right now, I knew one thing: it was enough. Would you take the leap for love, even when the world warns you not to? Can silence speak louder than words? And sometimes, is choosing someone worth all the risk?